lawyers are supposed to be tough. They're supposed to not let anything bother them. They're supposed to be, just immovable. And that's not the reality of almost every lawyer I know. The more we are open and honest about it, the more we talk about it, the more we can normalize that conversation about mental health, the better it will be. And I hope by the time my daughter, I have a 13-year-old, we'll see if she'll be a lawyer. She says she's not going to be a lawyer, but by the time she's an adult, I hope it isn't as taboo to talk about mental health issues, because I think, unfortunately, it still can be for a lot of people.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Answering Legal's Everything Except the Law podcast. I am your host, Nick Werker. If this is your first time tuning in, this is the podcast where we share expert advice on all the parts of running a law firm that attorneys weren't exactly trained for back in law school. Now, our guest today has been working in the world of law for over 2 decades and has accomplished quite a lot during that time. She is a partner for the firm Lightfoot, Franklin & White and recently finished a term as DRI president. Today, we'll be getting her perspective on some of the unique challenges lawyers face today and what can be done to improve the legal world moving forward. Lana Olson joins me now. Thank you so much for being here, Lana. Lana like banana. See, I didn't forget.
Like banana. Yes.
So again, thank you for joining us. Can you introduce yourself to our audience and tell us a little bit about your journey in the law?
I'd love to. I grew up in a college town, Gainesville, Florida. And never really had an idea I would be a lawyer. That was not on my radar at all. I was a trader to the University of Florida, went to college at Florida State University, and ended up coming to Alabama for law school, having no idea I would actually ever live in Alabama the rest of my life. But fell in love with Birmingham, Alabama, fell in love with my law firm, and here I am about 30 years later, still here and loving it. I clerked for a federal judge after I graduated law school in 1998 for a year, which was an amazing experience to kind of see behind the curtain how things work. And then I started with my firm, and I've been here almost 25 years.
Wow. I did almost the exact opposite as you. My life goal was to become a lawyer. And then I randomly, while I was in school, got a job working here. And now I've been here for 10 years, which is scary to say.
Yes, it goes by quickly. I was going to be a public relations person. That was my major actually in college. And there's a lot of similarities to things PR people do and lawyers, actually, if you're a litigator especially. But I really kind of got an interest in law my junior year. I didn't really have lawyers that I knew very well. I had an uncle who was a lawyer. So my experience was sort of LA law, Ally McBeal, if you guys remember Ally McBeal. That's dating me a little bit, but it seemed pretty cool. It seemed like it fit my personality. And so I kind of started down that road, not really having any idea what a lawyer did. And I remember showing up to my first day of law school, and they post the schedule, and there's all the different courses you take. And one of them was torts. And I had no idea what a tort was. I literally walked into the class having no idea what it was. So thankfully, I made it through, and here I am. But yeah, just goes to show you don't really have to know what a lawyer does to become a lawyer.
It's so funny because I remember being so excited for my first torts class when I took it in college. I don't know why. I took like business law and torts and all of that in undergrad, and I was very fascinated with it. And again, I just fell into this, and I love it here. So no plans to go to law school. Maybe one day I'll go to law school. But
there's so many things you can do with a law degree these days. It's interesting watching friends from college and law school, really sort of branch out in the world. Not everybody works at a firm. Not everybody is in-house with a company and a legal department. So I do think it's one of those degrees that really has a very broad application of things that you can do and have a really cool, interesting life with a law degree.
Definitely. I love talking to lawyers who are now consultants. I find it so interesting that it's like you went into the business of law and now you have a whole consulting business. The evolution of it is wild, and I love it.
It really is. I think one of the most interesting things from a consulting perspective is jury consulting, to be one of the consultants that helps look at the venire and sort of craft arguments and work with witnesses. I think I love when I get to work with jury consultants because it's just fascinating. They're experts in psychology and all these really cool things that are just fascinating to me.
Did you ever watch the TV show Bull?
No.
So you remember NCIS, like the original NCIS?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Tony Donoso or Donazzo he gets his own series as this guy named something Bull, and it's based on the guy who was the original jury, like science, and he basically works and it's I won't spoil it for you, and I don't want to get into it, but it's an insanely good TV show. It only lasted like 3 seasons.
Okay, I'm writing that down because I need something else for my Netflix run, so that's a good one.
You can get it on Amazon. I bought the whole thing on Amazon so that I could rewatch it a couple years ago.
Awesome.
Really good. But I want to talk about you. Obviously, we're here for you. So you recently finished a term as DRI president. For those who don't know, DRI is the largest international membership organization of attorneys defending the interests of business and individuals in civil litigation. That's a mouthful. Why was it important for you to take on that role, and what was your experience like?
So first of all, it was an amazing, amazing experience that I would not trade for anything. To tell sort of my journey, I will back up to being a very, very young lawyer. It was my first year of private practice. And I was put on a case. It was a toxic tort case, so a chemical exposure case. And there was a big file on my desk. And I didn't know anything about toxic torts, which is not surprising as a first year lawyer. But it really fascinated me. And I got a flyer that came across my desk for a DRI toxic tort seminar. And I was looking through it and I thought, it sounds like a good idea to go to a seminar like this and actually try to figure out what it is I'm supposed to be doing here so that I don't get fired. So that's really honestly how I became involved in DRI, was through that flyer. I had been practicing about, 2 seconds. So I'm a very young lawyer, show up at the seminar, and was just such a terrific experience. I learned so much from going. They actually had a special track for new toxic tort lawyers, a 101 session that taught me a lot about epidemiology and toxicology. And so I was really impressed with the quality of the education I got. But more importantly, I met some really outstanding toxic tort lawyers who kind of took me under their wing in the organization. And eventually, like many things, I raised my hand to volunteer for something. And it was a small little thing. And I did it well, and I did it on time, which, some days that's the most important thing. And so I kind of kept getting asked to do additional things, and eventually moved up in leadership in that committee. And over the years, as I did that, I was also, attending some other seminars, getting involved in DRI in some other ways. And there had been a women's seminar, not a committee, but a seminar that had taken place in the early 90s that had kind of, gone by the wayside. There was some interest in maybe revising that, bringing that back. But more importantly, there was a interest in setting up a women's committee, which we did not have at that point. So sort of by, happenstance, I became involved with a group of women, really amazing women, who really put together and pushed through the beginning of this women's committee. And that has been one of the things I have really been the most proud of in my career, is being a part of that group, because I think there are so many women lawyers that have been touched by that group. And I hope that we have made a difference to a lot of women lawyers by what we were able to do in setting that committee up. And I've seen the benefit personally from those women. So that was a really exciting thing for me. Eventually chaired the committee. And then after that, I ran for the board of directors for DRI, and I was on the board of directors for 3 years, which was also really a fascinating experience, and then ran for officer. And in DRI, the officer track is a little long. It's 6 years. So you kind of move up the ranks. So it's a pretty long process. But last year, it was the year I was president of DRI. I'm currently the immediate past president. So this is my last year on the executive committee. But it has been such a great experience for me personally, professionally. I have definitely honed my leadership skills. I have learned so much from all of the different opportunities I've gotten. And there are a lot of people that think just because you get put in a leadership position, that makes you a good leader. And I strongly disagree. I think especially in our industry, There are people who do things, they do what they're supposed to do. That doesn't necessarily always make you the best leader. It can. Obviously, that's the important thing is to get things done. But there are skill sets that can really be honed in terms of leadership skills. So I think seeing different leadership styles, I'm really a leadership nerd. I read leadership articles all the time. I think that part of it for me was such a great experience. And I know that I'm a better leader for my firm, for my teams I lead, for my clients, having had that experience. So I would say it's been one of the best things I've ever done professionally, other than, picking a great law firm to work for.
I couldn't agree with you more when you made your point about that just because you're a leader doesn't mean you're a good one. I'm a huge TV buff. I watch a lot of TV because I work a lot, and the only thing I want to do when I get home is like eat and sit down and decompress with my wife and my dog, and we watch TV. And so I remember when The Office was really big, like now it's way too long ago. I don't want to talk about how long ago The Office was now, but like Michael Scott is the classic, and you don't even really get the backstory in the beginning, right? So Michael Scott is this terrible, terrible leader. He's the general manager of a paper selling branch. If you haven't watched The Office, I don't know what rock you live under. But the whole point of them sort of obfuscating where he comes from is so that later they can bring in that he ended up in that position because he was just the best salesman, right? And so they took this skill of sales and decided to make him a leader, but he's a terrible, terrible leader, and he should never have gotten past sales. It's sort of like the Peter Principle. I know that you're big into leadership, so you know exactly what I'm talking about. Yep. The Peter Principle is like people will grow into the role that they are not meant for. So you have to watch out for this Peter Principle, is that somebody who's really high performing will continue getting new opportunities to grow until they eventually cap out, and then you have a problem. So you have to watch out for that principle. And I've been fortunate enough to have like executive coaching. So I've seen, and I look back at like the leadership things that I used to do in my role here, and I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I ever acted that way or said this thing in a meeting or thought about things in that way, right? Because mindset is so important. But I want to talk about your efforts specifically with the DRI as the president. And can you talk about like some of the things that you, I don't know, work to accomplish within the women's committee in the beginning, and then what was like your focus as DRI president as well?
Great questions. So on the women's committee question, I think at that time in particular, there were some women's groups, but they sometimes tended to be more complaining sessions than let's get together and let's support each other, let's build each other's skills, let's connect businesses. So really the impetus for DRI's Women's Committee was to be different than some of the other women's groups that we had seen and experienced. So, starting off from the very beginning, the goal was to let's improve our skills in substantive areas, in leadership and communication, all the things. Let's foster connections between these women because, no surprise, I know you've heard the stories. For many, many years, going back in history, a lot of deals and things get done on the golf course or in the men's locker rooms where, typically women aren't hanging out. So really trying to level the playing field a little bit and help promote each other, help make those same kinds of meaningful connections that we were seeing our male colleagues sort of naturally have the ability to benefit from. So that was really the idea behind it. We had an in-person seminar each year that would allow us to get together in person, get to know each other, training, skills, all sorts of things. And then we had an annual meeting once a year. So we kind of got to see people twice a year in person. And then there were all these things going on in between that. But it really, really has grown into such a great support system, network, business development, skills training for women lawyers. And I see younger women coming into the group and being mentored by, now I'm one of the more senior women, which is scary, but, being mentored by some of the more senior women. And it's really important to me because I think we need to be thoughtful about supporting each other as women lawyers, because it's a hard job. It's a hard job for anybody. There are particular things that not all women, but women that have families and kids and that just sort of fall on our plates because they do. And so trying to manage that and trying to deal with some of the stress and difficulties that come with that is really, it's important to have that network of people. And I think it's really important to have people outside your firm that you can talk to, that are not, that close with you, that aren't part of your firm. So I think that has really been, to me, a great benefit to so many women being able to be a part of that group and continuing to grow that group. In terms of my year as DRI president, there were a couple things that I really hoped that we could do. And I say we because there's nothing I could have done myself. It's a group effort. It's a very large organization, and we have a 6-person executive team. We have a CEO. We have really professional staff, and so doing anything in DRI is a group effort. Now, you can have some ideas of things that you'd like to work on and focus on, but it's not a place where you can just kind of do something on your own. So when I talk about things that were important to me, let me caveat that by saying that it was important to all of us. So one of the things, and going back to our leadership discussion, we have a large board of directors. There are 36 directors on our board. And we had a really terrific speaker, a board training leadership speaker, come in and talk to us. And one of the things we realized that we didn't have was a set written core competencies for what would make for a great board member. And so for me, in my little, leadership brain, that kind of set off a reaction that, gosh, that would be a great thing that we, could try to achieve this year. So we went through a long process and a lot of time, a lot of feedback, and ultimately were able to put together a board and officer competencies document that we now use when people run for those offices. So I think that was a maybe small, but I hope important and significant step towards providing visibility and clarity into what is involved with being on a board or an EC member, and making sure that we're getting the best board that we can. So I think that was one thing for me that was particularly rewarding, and glad to see that we were able to get that done. The other thing that I have always been really personally focused on is philanthropy. When I was on the board of directors, I chaired what's called our DRI Cares Committee, which is really the philanthropic arm of DRI. And we worked really hard to grow that part of the organization, to get lawyers connected with projects they could work on at our various get-togethers. And it's interesting, I think, when COVID hit, I think so many people took a step back and thought about their lives and thought about their careers. We had a lot more time to do that on our hands. And I think it became clear things like giving back and attorney wellness sort of grew to the forefront as things that came out of COVID that were even more important than maybe we thought they were. So we've continued to grow both the philanthropic arm and then the health and wellness arm, which I'll talk about separately in a second. But we have now partnered with a national company called Backpack Buddies. I'm going to say the name wrong. Where at each of our seminars, we do a project to help feed kids on the weekends who otherwise wouldn't have food. So we've really, I think, continued to grow that part of the organization. Relatedly, a personal story, I was sitting with our executive committee at a meeting, a year or two ago, and within a 2-week span, we learned that 2 folks that we all knew that had been, pretty prominent lawyers in DRI had committed suicide. And not that people committing suicide in general, I mean, it happens. It's terrible that it happens. But it really, particularly for me, hit home because it was 2 DRI members and 2 folks that I knew. And I remember thinking, they seemed so normal and so fine. And I caught myself when I said that thinking, gosh, what does that mean to seem normal? that is meaningless. So we really had this discussion about, can we devote some more energy and resources to trying to normalize the discussion among lawyers about mental health? And I think that is the hardest part about many professions, ours in particular. Lawyers are supposed to be tough. They're supposed to not let anything bother them. They're supposed to be, just immovable. And that's not the reality of almost every lawyer I know. So that is a long-term process. That's not going to change overnight. But I think the more we are open and honest about it, the more we talk about it, the more we can normalize that conversation about mental health, the better it will be. And I hope by the time my daughter, I have a 13-year-old, we'll see if she'll be a lawyer. She says she's not going to be a lawyer. But by the time she's an adult, I hope it isn't as taboo to talk about mental health issues, because I think, unfortunately, it still can be for a lot of people.
We will be right back after this short ad.
Answering Legal has provided many benefits to our law firm, most specifically improving our customer service and streamline the communication process. I'm Justin Reef, the Director of Administration here at the Reef Law Firm. The firm was established in 1986 by my father, Jeffrey. We're proud to be a family-owned firm. Answering Legal has ensured our business is accessible to clients around the clock, 24/7, during regular business hours, outside of regular business hours, on weekends, on holidays. And this is important because it ensures that important calls are not missed and matters are promptly addressed. Additionally, Answering Legal has been an extremely cost-effective alternative to hiring an in-house receptionist. And it's allowed us to streamline our communication process to where the caller is matched with the party they're seeking to reach, whether it be one of the attorneys, whether it be one of the paralegals, whether it be myself. That is probably the most crucial part of this business.
I love talking about this stuff. I share the same interest as you. So we do a lot of work with IWIL. And we work with the Legal Burnout Solution. They actually have their own podcast on the Answering Legal Network, which I love listening to. Becky and Cindy, big shout out to you guys. I love you. I think everybody knows somebody who unfortunately has committed suicide. And it's one of those things like, I don't talk about this a lot because it's part of, it's a personal issue, but I'm in the world of recovery. I'm a former recovered, whatever you want to call me. And I have a lot of mental health issues that I take medications for, and it's an ongoing process. But I like to talk about it because it's one of those things where it's I'm not ashamed of it. It's definitely not my fault, and I'm doing something about it. And I think letting people know that someone like me can be going through these things, you might not even know it, and I get the help that I need. Right, like nobody can do any of this alone. So you can't, I want to ask you more about it so I can stop talking about it. But so what initiatives have you been part of with the DRI with respect to wellness, and why is supporting lawyer wellness initiatives like so unbelievably important, especially in today's era?
Good question, hard question. And I'll answer it in a couple different steps. So this is a hard, stressful profession that those of us who are lawyers chose. And anybody who, strives to be a good lawyer is going to feel stress and pressure. You want to win, you want to achieve. And, we're not the only profession by any means that feels that kind of thing. But, we are one of the professional groups who have highest alcoholism levels, high rates of suicide. And the problem is our firms traditionally have not really been set up to be supportive of that. Many firms have an eat what you kill model, which is, as much as you bring in is what you get paid. And so showing vulnerability in any way has always been viewed as sort of this negative. And so I think for me personally, just like you talking about it is being an example. And I don't mean to say that I'm anything special or different, but I have been on anxiety medication since I was in my early 20s. I really started feeling it when I started practicing law and I started having the stress of being a lawyer, and particularly a new lawyer when you're trying to learn everything. I have a history of anxiety, severe anxiety in my family. So at least I was cognizant of it. I was aware of it, and I knew what to do when I felt it. That is not always the case. Mm-hmm. I knew I needed to go see someone. I knew that I might need to get on medication. And thankfully I did. And I have been on medication for 25 years. I actually wrote a DRI article about it last year, mainly just because I've never been ashamed of that fact, but I've never really talked about it. Mm-hmm. People who know me well know that, but you know, from a distance, people who see me, oh, well, she's a president of DRI, she's a partner of a law firm, she's all these things. You kind of get this impression that, gosh, she has everything together, everything's great, she's perfect, and she's sort of this, just everything is wonderful, and that's not the case. And so I remember I wrote this article that went in our magazine that went out to all of our members, 12,000 members, and I kind of wondered, gosh, what are people going to think about that? It's interesting if I'll hear anybody make comments about it. And I had so many people I didn't even know, email me and say, thanks so much for doing that, because it makes a difference to have people like you talk about it and acknowledge it. So I think we just have to keep doing more things like that. DRI has worked very hard to put together some resources, put together speakers. We try to do a lot of things as a legal organization to support lawyers. But, one of the first things that you have to do if it's you is you have to recognize you need help, and you have to figure out how to get help for yourself. And I think there's more that law firms could do on that front to be more visibly supportive of their lawyers. I think it's getting better than it was, but I think we still have a long way to go. So I hope to continue to see that part grow. The group within DRI that this bucket of mental health and wellness falls under is called DRI for Life, and it's all things with health and wellness and trying to be a better, more well-rounded lawyer. So it's exercise and mental health and all sorts of things, eating better. So there's lots of resources, but part of it is making sure people take advantage of what is out there. There are actually a lot of things out there. It's just there's still just this thing where people don't want to actually acknowledge that they might need help as a lawyer, because somehow it sends a signal that you're not tough enough. And I think that's just such a misnomer for what people really feel. And a lot of people, I think, feel very differently than what the perception is that are lawyers. At least I know a lot of lawyers that I've talked to that feel that way.
So I have felt the exact way that you just described, and I will give personal testimony that I was having a lot of trouble. I went and I saw a licensed professional who deals with medication, and in 30 days, this woman and I won't say solved the problem, but are on. We both acknowledge that we're on the right track, and so all it took was 30 days of me talking to some doctor, and if you think you could stick it out for 30 days, I mean, you might have a solution. It might not take. It might be longer for some people. It might be shorter for some people. You might have no problem at all, or you might have no awareness of the problem yet. But everybody needs help sometimes, and that's perfectly okay. And I want to ask you, because you obviously have dealt with the mental aspects of being a lawyer. So what sort of lessons have you learned over the years that have helped you in dealing with these mental aspects of your job?
So let me start by saying, as I maybe said earlier, I don't have it all fixed out by any means, but I've certainly seen things and learned things through the years. I think the first thing is knowing yourself and being honest with yourself and how you're feeling and what you need. The first time I had a panic attack, I didn't know what it was, but I knew that it was not okay, and that was not the way I was supposed to feel. And I think that over the years, you have to listen to your body, how your body feels. I have really good friends who are very wonderfully honest with me. And so I talk to them a lot, and they will say sometimes, is everything okay with you? Just, you're normally a very happy, chipper person. You seem like there's something going on. So I think if you're lucky enough to have good, honest friends like that will tell you the truth. Sometimes family will, sometimes family won't, depending on your family. But having good, honest friends, and then taking the time for time off and vacation. I will confess, as an early young lawyer, I had this impression that, my gosh, if I was gone for a week on vacation, all my cases would fall apart. And I learned over the years I'm not quite that important, and that things actually can continue to go on in my absence, and the world will continue to operate in my absence. And so really it's a matter of just, planning it and doing it. And I think I'm getting ready to go on a vacation in a week with my daughter to Europe, and I'm going to unplug, and we are going to both of us take a mental break. And I think that is so, so, so important. It's very easy to push that by the wayside because you're busy and you have deadlines. But the older I've gotten, and the more I have realized how important that is. I protect it and I make it happen, and I'm just not willing to give it up. Fortunately, I've got great people I work with that I can, be gone. I'm going to be gone actually for 2 weeks, and so I have planned ahead. I let everybody know I've got all my things in line. I will be available if there's some, earth-shattering emergency, but I've kind of told everybody to leave me alone. So I think, making sure that you're taking some time off for yourself. We are, and I think this is particularly true after COVID. It was sort of this way before COVID, and it was definitely not this way as much when I first started practicing. So when I first started practicing, it was just a slower pace. We didn't have constant emails and text. Things happened slower. People actually wrote letters to each other and faxed them back and forth. And so there wasn't this instantaneous thing that we had to stay on. And so that has changed over the years. I think when COVID hit and people started working remotely, I know that I fell into this trap for a little while. There really wasn't a end or beginning to my workday. It kind of just, it was all the time, and it just, because you're there and there's not really a separation in your life. And I had to really take a step back after a while and say, I need to treat my home days like a work day, and not just work all the time. And I think that I think that's the one. I love the ability to work remotely, and have the flexibility to do that when you need to. I think the one thing that is dangerous for me, I have to be very thoughtful about it myself, is creating the boundaries of my work and my home, because it's very easy to fall into you just work all the time unless you're asleep phase. So I think making sure that you're paying attention to boundaries. The other thing I think is making sure, and it's hard when you're a younger lawyer, and you just have to kind of trial and error it, is to sort of think about what it takes to meet deadlines and make sure that you're planning far enough in advance that everything isn't a fire drill. That's the thing that really, to me, boost that stress level unnecessarily high, is when there are just constant fire drills, and fire drills will happen, but they really don't need to happen all the time. So I think being able to figure out a system for yourself where you're organized and you can plan ahead and try to avoid the fire drills whenever possible just makes things from a mental health perspective a little easier. So exercise is the one thing that I will say. I used to be so good. COVID, I fell off the wagon completely. I'm still not totally back on the wagon. Exercise, I know, because I remember I did yoga all the time. I felt amazing when I exercised regularly, and I've just been traveling so much, I've not gotten back in my rhythm. So that is one of the things on my bucket list to really focus on this year, is to get back in my exercise schedule, because more than anything, that has a huge effect on mental health.
I used to be a competitive weightlifter, and so I spent so much time, and honestly, it brought me a lot of joy. It literally expels energy. So
Yes.
like it was so healthy for me. I would sleep better. And then COVID happened. I completely fell off. But right after COVID, I got into my very, very good friend became a yoga teacher like late in life, found her calling, and she's incredible. So I was going to yoga, but I'm going to make a pact with you right now that I will go back to yoga if you do, and I'll email you that I actually went back.
That's what I need. It's accountability. And I actually got my 13-year-old daughter. She can now go with me to my gym. And she's an athlete. And I told her, she doesn't really need the mental health as much as I do. But I told her how great yoga is just for overall strength and flexibility. And she has gone with me on the occasions I have gone to yoga. So I will take you up on your offer. I am a lawyer who, we all work with deadlines and accountability. So I do need that accountability. So I take you on for it.
Heck yeah. The only reason that I really want to get back into yoga is I miss being strong, but I just physically can't do the load of weightlifting anymore. It is just, there's not even enough time in the day. I was a much younger man with a lot of time on my hands, and I could lift weights for 3 hours a day. That is no longer feasible for me. But I want to talk about taking breaks, because I think lawyers are known for being workaholics. I am a self-pronounced workaholic, really bad. My name is Werker. My last name is Werker. I work. And very recently, a couple of weeks ago, my wife and I took our first vacation in 6.5 years. We never even took a honeymoon because we were just like, well, we'll go back to work. We'll make money. We have to save for a house. We bought a house. Okay, now we got to afford the house. And my boundaries were, before I left, I told everybody what calls that I would be on, what regularly scheduled meetings that I would be available for, what I could work on, and in what capacity. And I had the best vacation ever. And honestly, if I didn't work a little bit, I wouldn't have had as good of a time as I had. Because if you're like me, you don't have to completely unplug, right? You might want to completely unplug. That's cool. Go in the woods, go connect with nature, go to Europe, go see all of that amazing architecture, all the stuff. Do whatever it is that makes you happy. But for me, that peace of mind of after I get off a call, that gratification, okay, that only took me 45 minutes. Now let's go to the beach. Now let's go drive an hour to Charleston. Now let's go. And my wife, I told her that this is what would be happy. She didn't get mad at me. So that's even a bonus for me right there.
I will say, and I'm going to say I quote unquote unplug. I will check my email first thing in the morning. I'll be 7 hours ahead, mainly just so that when I get back, I don't have 47,000 emails in my inbox. So it's almost more getting rid of the clutter. And just, while my daughter, she'll sleep in later than I will. So while she's waking up, I'll do my thing in the morning, and then I want to be done. But you're right. I mean, that's unplugging for me, honestly, is not being on all day long. But there is a piece to going through the process for a brief period of time to just help. Because I will say the only thing about going on vacation is when you come back and there's the 72,000 emails. So finding a way to manage that without tipping into then working all day because you're reading the emails is a delicate balance. But I think, I'm going to have to do that some because it'll take me 3 weeks to go through the emails from being gone for 2 weeks if I don't.
Everything is balanced, and I'm sure you'll know how to balance it. I do want to ask you one more question that I didn't really get to, but I know that the women's initiative was super important to you. The wellness initiative is really important to you. What are you hoping to change for future generations of lawyers? And what does that path to change sort of look like? And what do you hope that the DRI can accomplish in the next coming years?
That is a great and very difficult, hard question, but I will do my best.
I know I'm asking hard questions, but
COVID, as awful as it was in so many ways, I do think there was a side benefit to actually showing law firms people don't have to be sitting at their desk every day, all day long to be a good lawyer. I think in particular for women who have kids, that flexibility is huge. So what has, I think, been hard for me to watch personally over the last 20 some years is really amazing women who, for whatever reason in their firm, get to a point where they just can't, they can't do it anymore. Part of that's because of just flexibility issues. Part of it is some firms just, there's just a model, and if you're not fitting in the model of what a lawyer needs to do, it doesn't necessarily work. So I think that as we continue on in the future, I think that there will be hopefully more continued flexibility so that one person's law practice doesn't necessarily have to look exactly like someone else's law practice and still be successful. When I was a young partner, I was getting really, really involved in DRI at that point. I got married. I had a young baby. Now I got married and had a kid later in life, so I was in a little bit different. I was already a partner, so that also helps. But I was really committed to and really wanted to ultimately be on the DRI board and be an officer in DRI, and I knew that was a goal of mine. And I just got to talk about mental health. I got to a point where I felt so stressed trying to do a young kid, a fairly new marriage, a full-time partner law firm, and all the DRI. I just said, I need something different. So I, worked on an arrangement with my firm where I just had a different compensation structure, a different billable hour requirement, but it allowed me to happily do the things I needed to do while still being a full partner in my firm, having a successful career. And then, once things calmed down a little bit, I was able to sort of come back into the mix. And that shouldn't be an unusual situation. I know for a lot of my friends that are women, even having that type of conversation is difficult. And there's sort of this, and not all places certainly, but there's almost a perception of if you're not 100%, you're not committed enough, or you're not serious enough, or you're not dedicated enough to be whatever. And so I think that trying to change the model of how things have to be a little more flexible, appreciate, and I will say everything I do a lot of reading and listening about the younger generations. They are going to want something different than what we have grown up with. It's just, they get a lot of complaints about this next generation, but I think to a certain extent, wow, they're maybe they have it a little bit better than we do in terms of how they're approaching their life. And not everybody wants to be a partner, and that's okay. And not everybody wants to, work 1 billion hours, and that's okay. You can still be happy and successful. Certainly there will always be people who want to do that, but I don't think that has to be the only path to be happy and successful as a lawyer. So I hope that continues to grow and change, and we continue to be more flexible than I think we were many, many years ago. The other thing, the model of law firms is interesting. There are a lot of firms, a lot of really, really, really big firms now, a lot of mergers. And so there's a different dynamic just generally with law firms about sort of the big mega firms and then regional firms and smaller firms. So between some of those type things and in the advent of AI and AI technology and how that's going to impact our practice, it'll be interesting to see how law firms make that work in a way where it continues to let lawyers do really interesting strategic work, keeps people busy and employed, but also takes advantage of some of the technology that I think can help us do our jobs better, honestly. But it'll be an interesting transition. Maybe by the time I retire, we'll be at a point where we can kind of see where it can go. But I think it's going to continue to just be a really interesting process that we just have to kind of work through. And I think lawyers tend to be a little bit behind on technology sometimes. So we will see. We're keeping a close eye on it in DRI and trying to educate our members about what's coming, what's here, and how you can use it to benefit you. That it's not necessarily going to take your job. It's a tool to help you be a better lawyer.
Difficult question. Excellent answer. So if our listeners want to get in touch with you or continue to follow your work, how can they do so?
Let me give you a quick. I'm on LinkedIn. I am a pretty regular LinkedIn follower and poster. I try to do that as much as I can. So LinkedIn is a really easy way to find me. You can certainly look up my law firm website, Lightfoot, Franklin and White in Birmingham, Alabama. I'm in the Birmingham office. We have a Houston, Texas office as well, but I'm in the Birmingham, Alabama office. But I love talking to people. That's one of the things I love about my job. That's one of the things I loved about DRI is I'm a people person. I love to meet people. I love to work with people. So would be incredibly happy to talk to anybody who's interested in law or anything that we've talked about. Would be happy to do that anytime.
That's awesome. Well, I'd like to thank you so much, Lana, for joining me on the show today. And thank you to all of our listeners. We hope you enjoyed this conversation, and we will be back with another episode of Everything Except the Law soon. Be sure to check out previous episodes of our show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and the Answering Legal YouTube channel. Links to everything covered in today's conversation can be found in the description of this episode wherever you are watching it. And Lana, thank you so much again for joining us.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
All right, we will see you next time, everyone.